Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today we continue our breakdown of ships that will be featured in Star Wars Squadrons. So far we've covered the multi-purpose starfighters for both the New Republic and Empire. If you guys want to check out those videos and all the videos in this series, we'll link it down in the description below, so check it out. Today we'll be moving on to the New Republic support craft, the UT-60D U-Wing. We'll be taking a look at its specs and designs along with its combat and developmental history. We'll also take a look at how Star Wars Squadrons, the new video game coming out, will be featuring this ship. Now don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below before we begin so you don't miss out on the rest of our series. In our X-Wing video, we kind of go over Incom Corporation's very turbulent history, especially after the Empire nationalizes the company. Basically, all the top designers and engineers defect to the Rebel Alliance. The rebellious company has a flair for the dramatic and, in my opinion, designed some of the most beautiful ships the galaxy has ever seen. This also extends to the extremely sleek and gracious UT-60D support craft. The U-Wing was one of the last ships produced by Incom Corporations before it was taken over by the Empire. Therefore, the U-Wing never went through a full production cycle. It was never marketed or advertised to clients or consumers. A shipment of U-Wings that were designated for the Empire were lost due to some careful manipulation of Senate records by Bail Organa. The Organas were famous for letting supplies and ships bound for the Empire just disappear and then suddenly reappear in rebel hands. It was actually a really risky move, and the Imperial Security Bureau did investigate Bail Organa, but being the senator of Alderaan at this time still gave you a lot of clout and political protection. Around 2 BBY, the Rebellion received their first U-Wing, and the Alliance Starfighter Command along with the Rebel Special Forces started testing the ship to see if it could be included in their operations as a transport gunship. General Antoine Merrick and Colonel Bandwin Corr ultimately approved of the U-Wing design and performance, and soon it was operating in the field. By 1 BBY, small rebel units like Saw Gerrera's partisans were successfully using the U-Wing for its operations. The U-Wing Bravo 1 would be instrumental in extracting future rebel hero Jyn Erso from an Imperial war camp, and that ship would also aid her in her first mission to find the Death Star plans. At the Battle of Scarif, a U-Wing was one of the few ships that managed to penetrate the planetary shields and deliver much-needed infantry reinforcements to the small strike force on the surface. That U-Wing was lost during the mission along with all the other ships, a testament to just how dangerous the U-Wing's role in the Rebel Alliance was. Now, after the Battle of Scarif, the war basically expanded exponentially. The UT-60D was in high demand all across the Rebel Alliance fleet for everything from prison transport to supporting ground assaults. The UT-60D would see heavy action during the Mid-Rim Offensive and Retreat. Post-Endor, the U-Wing would serve in the famous Alphabet Squadron and would be tasked with hunting down Shadow Wing, an Imperial unit that was a part of Operation Cinder. In typical Incom fashion, the UT-60D was designed to be extremely flexible and actually excelled in a variety of different tasks. In Star Wars Squadrons, the UT-60D is labeled a support craft, and I guess that is an apt name for the ship. In the earlier days of the Rebellion, though, the 60D served as a troop transport. It was extremely popular amongst Rebel ground pounders. I imagine they saw the UT-60D in the same way that US soldiers in Vietnam saw the UH-1 Iroquois, otherwise known as the Huey. Spotting a UT-60D on the battlefield meant two things to the average ground pounder. It either meant that they were able to go home, or reinforcements in the form of more soldiers, supplies, and munitions were about to arrive. The U-Wing was selected by Rebel forces as the main transport for Rebel ground forces simply because it was the only transport that could keep up with Rebel snub fighters like the X-Wing and A-Wing. The Rebels' hit-and-run strategy in the earlier years of the war depended on extremely fast ships and minimal contact with the enemy. The Rebellion was simply too outnumbered to stay and fight. And not only was the U-Wing able to keep up with Rebel snub fighters, it was even maneuverable enough to be designated as a starfighter. It wouldn't be able to outturn a TIE fighter or interceptor, but it wasn't completely helpless either, and in the hands of a skilled pilot, it could even take out some enemy fighters. At the same time, the platform was large enough to be outfitted with a variety of different weapons, meaning that it also made a pretty good gunship platform. This meant that unlike other transport ships that would bail after dropping its payload off, the U-Wing usually hung around and created chaos from the sky. In typical INCOM fashion, the U-Wing also incorporated massive S-foils, which could be deployed during combat situations. This gave the U-Wing a massive surface to dispel heat, making its cooling system much more effective and allowing the large ship to push all of its systems to the max. The S-foils, however, were a problem when it came to atmospheric entry. It would basically create too much drag, so during those type of maneuvers, the S-foils had to be tucked back in. Now, just a reminder, the specs we're going to be giving you are going to be slightly different from what we see in Star Wars Squadrons because of balancing issues and other things. There will also be plenty of opportunities to modify these ships yourself with aftermarket parts. At 23.99 meters in length, the U-Wing was massive and would look like this compared to an X-Wing or a F-150, two of the most common vehicles found on American roads today. The UT-60D has a Class 1 hyperdrive and is powered by four 4J7 fuselage thrust engines, essentially larger versions of what are found on the X-Wing. This allowed the U-Wing to easily keep up with the Rebel squadron both at sublight and hyperspace speeds. The U-Wing used an upsized version of the X-Wing's chem-pad deflector shield generator, and when the foils were fully opened, the coverage of the shield would also extend outwards, increasing the size of the shield and the amount of energy needed to power it. The U-Wing also featured a very advanced fabric tech targeting system along with holographic imaging for both the pilots and gunners. The U-Wing's main frontal weapons were fixed-position Time and Bach KX-7 laser cannons. These were extremely powerful energy weapons that could penetrate the shielding and hull of an Architon-class light cruiser. Given their heavier energy requirement and slower firing rate, these were more useful against capital ships and ground targets rather than smaller fighters. The U-Wing also had two open bay doors and gun ports from which the crew chief and other soldiers could fire fixed weapons. The Roba M45 repeating ion blaster was oftentimes mounted onto the U-Wing for ground support missions. The cockpit of the UT-60D featured a unique tandem control design which allowed the craft to be operated by a single pilot or a flight team of two. Now, INCOM Corporation purposely designs all of their mainline ships to have a very similar control scheme, so it is very easy for a pilot to move from one platform to another. Luke Skywalker famously got into a T-65B X-Wing for the first time in his life during the Battle of Yavin, but little did people know, he spent his entire childhood flying an INCOM speeder known as a T-16 Skyhopper, which actually had a very similar control scheme. It also should be noted there was an older variant of the U-Wing which only featured two engines and were far more underpowered. They also didn't have S-foils. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, the UT-60D in Star Wars Squadron is mainly going to be focused as a support craft rather than a starfighter. The larger size of the ship means that it will have a much larger turning radius, and it'll be a lot larger of a target for enemies to hit. But when playing in a team, the UT-60D is a support craft and will most likely feature active and passive buffs that will benefit nearby teammates. They can also repair friendly ships, prolonging the life of their squadron. Along with the usual armaments on board, the U-Wing will also feature a Krupp's JR-89 ion cannon, which can disrupt the energy systems of enemy craft and capital ships. Compared to the lighter fighters and interceptors, the U-Wing will feature a lot heavier shields and a lot tougher armor, which means it will be able to take a massive amount of damage, making up for its slightly less maneuverable chassis. It can also support bombers in anti-capital ship assault runs because of all the heavy weapons on board. So while the ship might be somewhat of a liability in a dogfight, on certain missions the U-Wing will be priceless because of the unique blend of things it's able to do. Now, I'm really excited to see the U-Wing in action in Star Wars Squadron. You guys know I love INCOM and all of their designs, basically, especially from a visual standpoint. But, you know, playing support class in multiplayer especially is going to be a little more difficult and boring, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how they can entice people to basically fly this much larger ship when you have, X-Wings, A-Wings, interceptors available as well. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about the U-Wing and how it will be in Star Wars Squadron. And also don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.